of the panelists. Everybody is pretty much here. And after that quick photo moment, we can get on with this. Just about get started. Welcome everyone to this post-lunch session. I hope everybody's had a good day so far with a lot of interesting dialogues. This one's from civil society on behalf of NGO Forum on ADB. My name is Ryan Hassan. I'm the executive director and your moderator for this afternoon. The session is an interesting one. Challenging ways forward, asserting community voices in the big discussion, I think, of the decade, which is just transition. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our esteemed participants. I'll start off with VP Saeed Ahmed. He's the Vice President responsible for East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Department of the Asian Development Bank. Then we have Ms. Fiza Qureshi, who is the Program Implementation Manager of Indus Consortium, which is an umbrella alliance of over 60 civil society organizations in Pakistan working on energy transition, humanitarian concerns, etc. We also have with us Ms. Miriam Azurin, Deputy Director of the Asia Pacific Hub of Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, GAIA. And with us needs no introduction, one of the leading climate activists in the world, Ms. Vivi Nakpil, who is also the coordinator of the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, and she's also a member of the coordinating committee of the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. We also have with us Ms. Tisha Soreska, who is the Transformative Finance Lead and the Renewable Energy and Climate Lead for the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development in the Philippines. And lastly, virtually will be attending my colleague, Tanya Roberts-Davis, who is our Just Transitions Advocacy Coordinator here at the NGO Forum on ADB, and she will make a video presentation later on in the proceedings. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to VP Saeed for some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to be here with you and with others. You said that just energy transition is the challenge of the decade. And I'm going to crack a joke, but I think that's the understatement of the decade, because it's the challenge of the millennia. It's and I don't mean to make too fine a point. I'm just trying to get a chuckle, not single out the comment. But I just say that at the outset, just to underscore how incredibly significant the challenges ahead of us are. And I want to begin, of course, by thanking you for inviting me to this important discussion, to be on the dais with people who are making very important contributions to our dialogue on these issues. This is the largest and most consequential effort in collective action that I know of in history. The stakes are enormously large. People often talk about the fact that the entire economy will be transformed. In fact, all of society will be transformed, or must be transformed, from the way we engage, to the way we move, to the way we eat, to the way we live. And it's a process that must begin now. It must proceed at a pace that is rapid. And it's a process that demands the involvement of every individual and every institution, working from its place in the system, hand in hand and in collaboration with all the others. Ironically, and this is one of, I think, life's, in my view, truly wonderful ironies, is that this existential threat, this thing that is so dire, I actually think represents the single greatest opportunity to drive development progress that I am aware of, certainly in my lifetime. And the reason for that is that it is mobilizing a community of action which is broader, deeper, wider, has more capability and commitment than I've ever seen brought to this task. And the challenge for all of us is, how do we move from a world within which we're depleting our future to a world within which we're investing in our future? And by the way, I think that comment is bigger than climate, but that's, I think, a related but different topic. But the point I do want to make is, again, to return to, is that we're at a moment in time when this generation, all of us in this room, virtually, physically, and others, if we dedicate ourselves to this exercise, genuinely have a capacity to leave a better place. A planet that is more sustainable, one within which we live in better harmony with both our environment and with our fellow humans. And so I think that's the potential of the moment. And I think it's really a significant potential. There are many things we talk about. We talk about things like fossil fuel imports not being right. Even more important, I think, is this potential to have zero marginal cost, bountiful, sustainable energy. And we know that energy and civilization are two different words for the same thing, that access to energy and access to the possibility of flourishing as a human. These are deeply, deeply intertwined things. None of this can happen if it is not just. Not only should it be just, but it must be just. And I say must, I think there's a weak form of the word must, and there's a strong form of the word must. The weak form of the word must is, I insist it has to be so. But the strong form is there is no path to that outcome without it being so. And when I say that the transition must be just, I mean it will not happen. It cannot happen until it is just. From our place in the ecosystem as an institution invested with certain capabilities by our shareholders, and invested even more so with capabilities by those who deign to work with us of their own volition, we're trying to do our work and our effort to set out on this journey. It's a long journey. It's one within which we do not have the luxury of waiting until we figure everything out, because the clock is ticking. And so we ask your forbearance as we work our way through things that we're trying to pilot. We're making no claims about their perfection. We will make claims about their intent. And the fact that we do our work and we do our best to design them as much as we're capable before we set out. But at all points, it's a journey of learning by doing, and that involves listening very, very carefully to those who are affected. This approach to the just transition at ADB is anchored in 4 key strategies. The first is to ensure that just transition is mainstreamed across everything we do, and that is reflected in all the work. The second is to raise our game, to build our institutional capacity and our ability to deliver and support just transition in developing countries. The third, and we are a financial institution after all, is to ensure that we mobilize the quantum of resources that will be needed. And then the fourth, much more powerful, I think, than finance, is to bring to bear knowledge, to push the ecosystem to innovate, and more than anything, to be a collaborator with others, including you. I'm really, on this journey, I think, in many ways, in this work, I think for me personally, the single most rewarding thing has been that when you do purposeful work, you end up working with other people who are doing purposeful work. And there's few rewards in life more than the connection you build with people who share purpose. I've been privileged to build that connection with many of my colleagues. I'm looking at this in the room. It's a connection that I feel very deeply. And it's an honor to be with all of you, and I hope we, over time, for me personally, and I know many of my colleagues already have that connection with some of you, but I'm hopeful that that web of mutual respect of benefiting as we glean from each other's engagements and continue to grow and grow. So thank you so much.
Thank you, VP Saeed. I'll probably sit here. This makes for efficient moderation. Without further ado, Ms. Frieza, just transitioned, and we have the ADB VTM as one of the schemes on early retirement of coal power plants. Your thoughts on the matter? Is that a solution fit for purpose?
Thank you very much, Ryan, and Angel Forum on ADB. Anybody who can help to it's not moving? Yeah, thank you. So, I would like to present the case of Pakistan regarding its energy transition mechanism, and the pre-feasibility study of Pakistan was initiated in October 2022, worth $300,000. So, before pre-feasibility study, and even after, at this stage, the pre-feasibility study draft has been shared with some of the civil society organizations and the network of communities, globally network. Before pre-feasibility study and after the drafts of this pre-feasibility study, the globally network and Indus Consortium and some other alliances, they have submitted the written concerns to the ADB country office and also did some deliberations with them. So there are some very key concerns of the communities regarding that pre-feasibility study, that the MCA and the regulatory analysis reports are not uploaded on the ADB website, and the very key documents on ETM, those are not translated in local languages, they are in English languages, so hence they are not really accessible by the key stakeholders and the communities which are going to be impacted by those coal power projects. And although ADB has mentioned that assessment and the consideration of impacted communities will be covered during the feasibility study analysis, but when the draft report is there, the communities mentioned constitute only those communities that are engaged with these assets and owner companies as employees. And the stakeholders mapping explained in the studies do not include or consider the broader communities that are being impacted by these polluting power plants. And there is no indication of carrying out assessment for compensating the communities and areas that are adversely impacted due to the polluting assets. So the question arises that how it will be ensured that this ETM scheme will not only be incentive scheme for investors, but it will consider the environmental cleanup, community livelihood restoration, and other aspects as well. And according to that MCA study, identified 3 power plants out of 5 have a life cycle of 10 years. So almost the initial 5 years will be consumed in the ETM process and the engagement process with the asset owners. So merely retirement for 5 years earlier looks like the burden on the taxpayers' money. And in addition, these power plants identified for the retirement under MCA are mostly of medium capacity. So overall, they are not really going to much impact on the overall picture of the energy mix of the country. And the recent first ever indicative generation capacity plan, IGCEP, of Pakistan, it has a huge share of local coal and imported coal and RLNG. So how the ETM is going to work in this scenario? And one very important point is this, that the pre-feasibility study is silent on the gas. And the technical assistance grant that is allocated to support plans for the ETM in Pakistan, the very same technical assistance study intended to support gas development in the country. So, there are the dots connected that what will be done with the mega structure and land of phase out coal power plants, whether it is tends towards the gas transition as a fuel. So, these are really big questions the communities have. And I really want to quickly share the ADB's funded oil and gas projects in Pakistan. This is what the whole list here, and I really want to highlight a few of them very quickly. The first ever Anglo LNG power project that is funded by ADB in 2015, and the last disbursement made in February 2022. And this is what the condition of the vicinity of the communities surrounded by the Anglo LNG project. This is another Dahati power project, the last disbursement made in July 2022. Jamshoro power generation project, which is located in the thickly populated vicinity, surrounded by 3 public universities, and its closing is just revised a few days back as in June 2027, without any news highlighted and just silently uploaded on the website, and the last disbursement made in 2022. This project in June 2022 in Balochistan, last disbursement made, and in August 2022, the devastated floods made, which affected Balochistan and Sindh provinces. These are what the real-time pictures of those floods 2022, in which 33 million people are adversely impacted. So the ultimate objective of the ETM is to strengthen the Paris Agreement and keep 1.5 degree alive. So the question is that before entering into the business of ETM, can ADB set the precedent to stop funding its own funded coal and gas projects? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Very powerful presentation, and really, it's all about project selection. Is the ADB picking the right projects? And from your description of the energy mix, I think the question is still out there. Moving next, Maya, Nazur, and Gaia. Are we missing anybody out in this just transition debate?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us here. Thank you for coming. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Asia Pacific, and specifically on waste paper issues.
Maya, I'll just correct you for a second. Can you please switch on the Gaia presentation at the back, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Waste Keepers constituency of Gaia Asia Pacific. They were supposed to come here, but due to these problems, and the substitute speaker, and I'm privileged to be with every one of you. In the past few months, we have campaigned for the phase out of incineration, and we welcome with caution the order of priority when using waste as a feedstock to energy introduced in the energy policy. It states that the first priority is waste reduction, then reuse, and then recycling before energy incinerators are chosen as an energy and waste option. Prioritizing the first 3 higher options, reduce, and recycling, would render incinerators unnecessary for cities and communities, which we prove have worked for decades. But we were surprised that after a month of approval of ADB's energy policy, ADB has approved the waste-to-energy incineration project in Binh, Vietnam. Without clearly indicating that this prioritization is being followed, more troubling is that we see WT as part of alternative fuel for the energy transition mechanism, despite several studies showing how incinerators are in direct competition with millions of waste pickers who contribute greatly to sustainability of our cities, climate resiliency, and inclusive circular economy. So, I'm starting to demonstrate or introduce you who our waste pickers are. Our waste picker constituency were concerned that none of the safeguards documents or country poverty analysis indicate or show or describe who they are. So we're starting with this. They are engaged in waste collection, sorting, aggregation, and sale for recycling, and they have played a historical role in reducing pollution. So when they collect garbage like this, they break it out and then they sort it, which are recyclable or which are not. The metals are being collected, recycled, and then sold to recyclers, to junk shops, to aggregators. And they reduce pollution in that cycle. They belong to the lowest economic classes and marginalized backgrounds, working class. They are survivors of abuse and violence across classes, religious and ethnic minorities, indigenous communities, climate refugees. At the start of the COVID pandemic, we have seen increasing waste pickers from educated classes or factory workers. They have gone to waste picking as a result of job losses. A substantial number of waste pickers are women workers, but they are disadvantaged in the work. More men are receiving more income from women. Waste picking and informal waste collection is low investment and income work. There is no barrier to entry. And they are exposed to hazardous working conditions, including exposure to air, water, and soil pollution, heat, and high humidity. But increasing WT investment eliminates existing community assets and solutions that they provide. The expert knowledge on waste management needed for inclusive circularity. For this waste, they know that this cap here is high-value plastics. They know where to recycle this, where to dispose. But when they extinguish them, and this part of the waste, in some parts they are not recyclable. In some countries they are, this depending on the recycling ecosystem. So that expert knowledge is extinguished when we build the waste-to-energy incinerators, because we all burn the waste that are being fed into this infrastructure. Waste handling and transportation burdens their contributions on waste handling and transportation, and we also use the supply of raw materials for recycling industry and remanufacturing sector. With engaged in organic waste management, they also provide compost and biogas that are existing in Philippines, Indonesia, and other parts of the world. Through their work in recycling, Indian waste pickers alone reduce more than 6.8 megatons of carbon emissions annually. On an average, waste pickers have a negative carbon footprint of negative 4.2 tons a year, whereas waste-to-energy incinerators are more climate intensive. So it's not only the workers in the waste pickers at the lowest bottom of the waste value chain. We also lose remanufacturing jobs, recycling jobs, and repair jobs. Compared to landfilling and incineration, based on our study in 16 cities across the world, remanufacturing creates 30 times more jobs, recycling 50 times more jobs, repair 200 times more jobs than landfilling and incineration. So, as we mentioned, we did not see any plan for waste pickers in waste management programs or waste-to-energy programs. So, what does just transition mean for waste pickers? This is a result of various consultations, nationwide consultations, among and between civil society and among waste pickers. They mean fair and inclusive as possible for everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunities, recognize their fundamental human dignity and their historic contribution, emphasis supporting waste pickers and other workers who are most vulnerable to occupation disruption from waste management investments in climate change. It must build and improve upon systems from waste pickers that have already established while guaranteeing better and decent work, social protection, more training opportunities, appropriate technology transfer, support for infrastructure and organizing of workers, and greater job security for workers at all stages of the waste sector. Organized waste pickers even hope for capital for transportation and storage of all the collected waste so that they can trade at scale. Effective social dialogue among all groups impacted in understanding the local context. And I'm glad that Said said listening intently with those who are affected. And that's what we hope when we invited our waste picker constituency. If they cannot come here, we hope that project officers can come to them. And all these are built upon ILO resolutions and guidance on informal economy, just transition, and different national promulgations on basic sectors. This is just to share that this is happening. The Zero Waste Cities implementation is happening, which is no incineration at all. So in 47 project sites, we were able to empower 262,000 households who does waste segregation. And 305 tons of organic waste composted. We have reduced plastic waste by 61,300 tons. We have improved community health, improved waste ecosystem. At least 23 local policies have been put in place, and that with waste-to-energy incinerations, this is being undermined. And there is increased collaboration among civil society, local government, and waste pickers. To recap, waste-to-energy incineration works against waste pickers and their chances of improved economic opportunities. It is not part of a just transition. Second, we have to recognize waste picker as part of development. If you want to eliminate waste, let's not eliminate the waste pickers. They have faces. They have real families to feed. They have real dreams. And then third, shift investments towards zero waste solutions that are affordable, demonstrable, empowering, and not climate intensive.
That's it. Thank you, Maya. Well, it's unfortunate, those who are actually working in the waste and who have been reducing it for so many years are not being recognized by the trillions of dollars being discussed in just transition. Maybe on that note, I'll move to Ms. Lydia Naquil. What should be the principles of an equitable, socially just transition? Any thoughts?
Thank you, Ryan. I can't seem to make this work.
Yeah, I think that microphone's not working. Can somebody have a portable mic, please?
Yeah, in the meantime, I can speak with a loud voice. Can you hear me? Thank you. So I'm happy to share the information that there is now a global process going on among civil society to develop principles and parameters for the rapid, equitable, and just transition to renewable energy systems. This project, or this process, which is for shortcut, is called the Guardrails Project, is in its early stages, but I think in a few weeks we will be able to share and circulate a document that we are hoping civil society groups across the world will be interacting with, providing inputs and so on. So for starters, we're preparing about a set of 10 principles and parameters that will guide this just, rapid, and equitable transition. And I don't think I have time to discuss all of these 10. So I'd just like to highlight some of these principles that I think ADB should very much take note of because it's directly relevant to the work of ADB. Well, the first principle, I think it's very important to say very clearly that a rapid, just, and equitable transition to renewable energy systems should end up at a place where we are able to provide universal access to energy. It is quite tragic that millions of people across the world, especially in Asia, the biggest number in Asia, are still dealing with energy poverty. The ADB has taken note of this in several studies. And we want to ensure that a transition to renewable energy systems is not about just the type of energy that we're using, it's about ensuring there is universal access. The second principle is very much related. Of course, there is energy efficiency. So we're not just shifting to different energy types. We have to manage energy demand. But we are saying here it's no longer just enough to talk about efficiency. We have to adopt a new paradigm of energy sufficiency, because what we are seeing in the world is very excessive consumption of energy in the global north, especially among the elites and corporations, and the rest are just barely struggling to access energy. So if we're shifting systems, we need to have this new paradigm of what is sufficient to ensure decent, basic needs of people, to ensure a sense of shared prosperity, but not to see this kind of excessive wastage of energy consumption. We need to build democratic and efficient energy systems where communities are not marginalized from decision making about energy sources and marginalized from energy management or even control of resources. And renewable energy systems are really very appropriate for the kind of redistributed and decentralized energy systems, of course combining with the large grids, because we still have our large cities, especially in Asia, and this is really very much should be a part of the agenda of the transition. Skipping some of this, which because we all know about upholding and protecting basic human rights, ensuring land and water use, because there will be potential competition between, for instance, food and renewable energy, I'd like to just put a major focus on mobilizing the right kind of finance in the right kind of way. And there are two concerns that we have here, because currently the discourse on mobilizing finance at scale for the just transition is putting a lot of primacy to the role of multilateral development banks, such as the ADB, to provide finance at scale. And one of our one concern we are really deeply troubled about is how does that match to the fact that most of the developing countries are struggling with huge public debts? If MDBs are going to play the prime role in mobilizing this finance, we are expecting that much of this finance will be in the form of lending, of course, because that is the core business of development banks. And we submit that even for building renewable energy systems, where we are aiming for a large bulk of this to be community-controlled and community-based energy development systems, if the financial instruments will be primarily in the form of loans or debt-creating instruments, and if these loans are going to be resulting in higher, bigger, even bigger than what they currently have, public debts of governments, then this is going to have a very big trade-off in terms of the ability of governments to provide other essential services. But we do need finance for governments if they are, and they should, play a major role in ensuring that the just transition is indeed just, that energy poverty is actually addressed, and that the private sector role, which is still vital in this new economy, in this new energy systems, will be properly, and also of markets, will be properly managed and regulated. We need stronger capacity for governments. So we have some ideas which we've shared before with the ADB in submissions. So for instance, one of the things that can probably be recalled by Ryan, one of the ideas that we put forward is, now that ADB is acknowledging that it should no longer lend for new coal projects, because implied in there is this acknowledgement of the harm that this coal projects has caused. What will ADB do with outstanding loans related to the coal projects that it has financed? One of the ways that an innovative way of financing renewable energy is to just simply cancel the outstanding debts related to these coal projects, because there's still huge amounts of outstanding debts. Not just coal, but also fossil fuel projects. Or, if that is not within the policy menu of ADB, they can simply also convert these outstanding debts into grants for renewable energy. They will not require upfront cash flow from governments, but governments can actually manage the savings that they will be having from the conversion of these loans, outstanding debts. into financing renewable energy systems. So these are just some of the policy options for starters. So finance plays a heavy role, but also does the idea of financing that will be using public finance to leverage private sector investments. And one of our concerns is that this is one of ADB's favorite instruments, but one of our concerns, of course, is how much will that leave the public treasury or governments unable to finance their own needs to play their leadership role. I will end by one last, and that is the guardrails will also deal with what are so-called renewable energy projects that have also been proven to be harmful for communities and for people, for the environment, and for which the ADB has also been known for. I guess the ADB knows that we have spent decades mobilizing against big and large hydro projects, so we're just serving notice that we do not consider this as proper part of the menu of options for renewable energy systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. I think with those principles, we really are looking at potential solutions where ADB can turn ship in the right direction. Going back again to coal retirement and this big experimental plan which the ADB has, what's happening in the Philippines, Patricia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's not pressing long enough.
There's a mic on the way to your rescue.
Thank you. I can't assume I can speak as loudly, but I hope we can still be heard across the room.
Practice.
Thank you. Hopefully, I'll get there. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jerry Arances. No, I'm kidding. I'm Tisha. I'm this slightly younger, slightly prettier representative for today. So, it's such an honor to join everyone. And I'm here to talk to you about the CSO demands from the Philippines from the ADB. But we need to ground these demands or these requests and these calls from the Philippines in ADB's historical contribution to the coal reliance in the Philippines. ADB funded major coal projects in the Philippines that affected the health of people in host and nearby communities, and it affected livelihoods of thousands of people. Filipinos living near these projects suffer from multiple health issues like skin diseases, heart diseases, and even premature death. And of course, it also affects their livelihood when it impacts marine ecology and even the growth and development of agriculture in those areas. We're also seeing among the important impacts of this coal reliance the increasing and exorbitant rates of electricity the Philippines is suffering now. It has been going on for years and it's not getting better. We're also expecting outages over the summer, which happens regularly during this season. Also to highlight, these are the projects that ADB financed over the years. The Pagbilao power plant, which affected the livelihood of local fisher folk communities. The Masinloc power station, which again impacted the agricultural industry, specifically the mango export industry in the area. The Halaka power station, which, as I've mentioned, made very important health impacts, very negative health impacts on the community, including respiratory infections, pneumonia, diarrhea, hypertension among its residents. And of course, the Naga Power Complex. So these are among the projects that ADB funded in the Philippines, and it's so important to emphasize this because we're now talking about the ADB's energy transition mechanism. And what is the role that ADB will now play in the energy transition in the Philippines and overall in Southeast Asia as we move forward? How will the ADB meet the demands of civil society as far as strict alignment with the 1.5-degree Paris goal, especially since even though the ETM is supposed to retire these coal plants earlier, there's also an expectation that it's going to operate it for quite an amount of time. We're also asking how the ADB will address calls to stop financing fossil gas. In the Philippines, we have a massive expansion of the fossil gas industry being proposed. As you can see from the 6 fossil gas power plants existing now, there are 34 proposed LNG power plants and 11 LNG import terminals being proposed in the area. With ADB's energy policy, being restrictive but still being open to financing fossil gas, ADB is risking moving against itself or employing counterintuitive mechanisms instead of pushing the Philippines forward towards renewable energy, it might actually contradict itself. We're also calling for the ADB to stop entertaining ammonia and other fossil solutions. Ammonia, the fossil fuel intensive processes used to produce ammonia negate potential carbon dioxide emissions reductions from co-firing it. Also, we've seen that some coal projects have been entertaining ammonia as well, and it appears that entertaining ammonia as the replacement fuel will only prolong the lives of these coal plants. So we're asking the ADB to stop entertaining these. It's important to emphasize also that supporting or financing these coal-fired power projects for any longer will only result in these communities suffering from these impacts even longer. So with the 15-year winding down upper limit, even then, these communities will continue to suffer from the agricultural impacts, from the health impacts, from the premature death, which we've been flagging over the years. We're also calling now for the public finance should be only for public projects. In the Philippines, we have a very privatized energy industry, so as you might expect, any EPM employed for the Philippines will likely go to private companies or private financiers who already willingly took up these risks when they put up these power projects and who already are complicit in the climate crisis that we're facing now. So why would we bail them out? We're asking ADB not to. Instead, we're asking the ADB to promote community microgrids and, of course, to support innovative and enabling infrastructure. What's important in the Philippines, which we want to emphasize for the ADB, is if you look at the policies and the technological advancements and developments that's going on in the Philippines, it would be much more advantageous for the ADB to focus on financing renewable energy. In a study commissioned by the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development with Climate Analytics, it was found that to be able to align with the 1.5-degree Paris goal, the Philippines would have to have an 80 to 83% renewable energy power mix by 2030. And you'll see here that by 2040 it must rise to 99 to 100%. So gas needs to be phased out by 2035, and coal needs to be phased out by 2035. And these are the studies so that the Philippines can meet its commitments and be aligned with the 1.5-degree Paris goal. And this is supported by the policies or some of the things the government is doing now. We have set for June the second round of the Clean Energy Auction Program, and we have developments in the country which show that the potential is there. The need for renewable energy investments, the growth will be there. The question is, will ADB contribute to this now? What is the role that ADB will play in the clean and just energy transition in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trisha. Very powerful input. Well, one thing is for certain, Philippines is trying to do the right thing. Will ADB be an enabler or an obstacle in that transition process? So, VP Saeed, a whole range of issues for you. We went through the entire spectrum of just transition, from principles to waste pickers to everything in EPM. Reactions from your side, please.
Thank you very much for this very candid dialogue, and let me express my appreciation to Liddy and Mayan and Maria and Fiza for sharing their perspective. I think there was a lot there that there's quite a bit of there that we all agree on, and I think it's important to start there before also unpacking some of the important points made where there may be a difference of perspective. And I think we all clearly agree on, at a very high level, again to reiterate where we began, is that this transition must happen, that it must be just. And I think it's important to note that, because when later one gets into potential differences of opinion in how to pursue that objective, it's important to know, in my view, we're all on the same team. And then we have to listen to each other, and we will certainly do our part by trying to listen to what we're hearing from others so that we're not missing important things. maybe just some other thoughts. One thing I did want to say, and I was saying to Visit before, in her deck she had a picture of the fishing village of Cheshma, which I actually remember fishing in as a child because I had not, who lived not too far from there. So it was a nice memory to see those pictures. But just to cover some of the things that I heard that I think we have quite a bit of agreement on. I think in a number of your principles that you were articulating, we don't want to have waste. We need to be financially responsible in how we incur debt. We need to make sure, you didn't say this explicitly, but I thought it was implicit, we need to make sure that the balance between action through public sector actors and action through private sector actors is the appropriate balance. We need to ensure that there's a continuing focus on human rights. I think all of those things are areas where we have common ground. I think, just a few other things that I would note as being areas of agreement. I think we agree, actually, that the prior association with fossil fuels had consequences that we weren't thinking about fully at the time, and we didn't realize. It's one of the reasons why that policy has changed. It's one of the reasons we now focus on being a climate bank, because there's a recognition that there were externalities, both economic and environmental and human, to the pursuit of good objectives through means that proved over time to be imperfect to that cause. And I don't think that that's a point of disagreement with us either. Now, I think if I'm going to spend all that time on where we agree, then I should also spend a little bit of time acknowledging where that there's need for greater conversation. There are a few things I disagree with. I disagree, and this is with respect and in the spirit of respecting each other by being transparent about where there may be a difference. We're not trying to bail anybody out. That is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, now those are ambiguous words, so we have to define what we mean. We are trying to construct a mechanism that accelerates the energy transition, being both principled and pragmatic. We're not buying anybody out of a power plant. And we're only trying to develop a mechanism, and again, pilot, one thing that I want to keep emphasizing. The current ETM structure is a pilot. And so your feedback, if you see a transaction and you say, that one was a bailout, let's talk about it. The first ETM transaction involved no public money. Zero. And it could have. There's an opportunity for it to involve public money. We made the decision, we said, that's going to go out without public money. We're not going to public capital into it for that. It doesn't have to be there. So we may make mistakes in executing against the principle, but the principle for us is never bail anybody out. That's not what we're trying to do. That's a longer conversation. What does that mean and how does it happen? We want to have that conversation. By the way, one other thing I want to come back to where we agree. Absolutely we want to do renewable energy. Absolutely we want to do microgrids. Absolutely I think there's a long-term trend towards localization of infrastructure, which is extremely healthy for communities. And technology enables it. It's in many cases the best solution. I don't think there's I think the point that was made, if you're going to do ETM, then first stop coal and gas. I'd sort of say two things about that. We've stopped new coal in the new energy policy. But let's say that it was 3 years ago and many of us were advocating for stopping coal with an ADB, and we're fighting that fight, and we haven't won it yet. Why shouldn't we start something else that's good? Of course we should. So that's something I have a difference of opinion with, which is if you haven't done, let's say there's two good things. You haven't quite gotten to the first one yet. Should you not do the second until you get to the first? No, I say go pursue them both at the same time. I don't know what will happen. So I'm just saying all of this in the spirit of having a very candid exchange. But I want to come back to that this entire dialogue is extremely useful and valuable. I think we care deeply about the same things. We care deeply about the same people. And so I think, your comment, let's eliminate waste but not the waste pickers, that's very powerful. We need to make sure that just because some mega scale intervention, if it displaces larger communities, yes, absolutely, that's something that we have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to do the right way. So maybe let me just pause there. But those were just, there's a lot of rich material here, and there's too much to be able to react to in a limited amount of time. But hopefully we can continue this conversation.
Thank you very much, Vicky Said, and thank you for addressing most of the issues which were raised. Just for the sake of time, do you think you can stick around a little bit longer, or? I
will check. I'm supposed to be somewhere at 3:45. I think I'm. Sorry, my craving.
You're 5 minutes over.
I have to be on another panel. I apologize.
Well, a round of applause for Vicky Said. Hopefully we can continue this conversation moving forward with your office, and most of the folks are in Philippines.
That's what I was going to say. You're in Manila, so there's no reason why we can't. So, okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. For the sake of this discussion, I know there should be, this is lovely to see, a whole range of people in the room very interested in the topic, and we want to hear from as many of you as possible during the Q&A session. We have one more input. It's a video input for a change of tone from my colleague Tanya Roberts. She's going to cover a few recommendations actually at this AGM venue around just transition and responsible financing by the ADB. So those at the technical support at the back, can you kindly play the video?
Thank you to all of you for joining this session this afternoon. I will focus my remarks on a few overarching critical concerns in relation to the ADB's energy transition mechanism and financing, which, from the NGO forum on ADB, we see as key to addressing if the process of energy transition is actually to serve the interests of the public, if it is to uphold principles of transformative social, economic, gender, resource, climate, and environmental justice, if it is to step up with the ambition required in the midst of the climate crisis, and if international human rights obligations are to be fully respected. First is the issue of transparency and public accountability. As you have heard from previous speakers, there are major concerns about the lack of disclosure of the plans and financing flows moving forward related to the energy transition mechanism and similar coal repurposing schemes proposed across the region. Most notably, for example, documents are not being regularly uploaded to the ADB's website, and when they are, there is no corresponding information in local languages. A just transition in the interests of communities and workers would unequivocally require the need for robust, cross-sectoral public debate and meaningful public involvement in decision-making processes. Yet, there's been no commitment to open public discussion on which projects will be selected as pilots under the ETM, or to have, for example, public hearings open for input from communities, workers, and civil society groups once pilot ETM projects are shortlisted or selected. Instead, it appears that decisions about which projects will move forward are subject to the whims of backroom deals, veiled by non-disclosure agreements. Similarly, there's been no commitment to enable workers, communities, and concerned civil society organizations access to summaries of the renegotiated power purchase agreements. However, disclosure of the terms and conditions under which selected projects are to be refinanced and decommissioned is critical if there is to be public accountability. Second, gas is a fossil fuel. Yet to date, the ETM country-level analysis being done of high carbon emitting projects has proceeded thus far in each country to conveniently sidestep addressing the buildup of infrastructure associated with fossil gas. Going forward, the analysis of gas-dependent infrastructure must be incorporated into comprehensive ETM scoping studies and further excluded from ADB financing. A case in point of concern is that of Kazakhstan, where the ADB has recently extended the ETM, but at the same time has approved a coal-to-gas switching project, meaning on the one hand, while claiming to support decarbonization of the energy system, at the same time, in practice, the Asian Development Bank is continuing to directly finance projects that will leave countries locked into dependence for years to come on fossil fuels. Third, supporting resource-intensive false solutions as part of the energy transition is unacceptable. This includes techno fixes like refurbishing coal power projects for co-firing with ammonia or biomass, or incinerating waste, as well as support for the build-up of large hydropower projects, none of which have a place in a just transition. Fourth, there is a lack of clarity on how the EDB proposes to remedy harm wrought by coal power projects selected for early retirement. Specifically, for instance, in the case of selecting the 660 megawatt Cirebon Unit 1 as a pilot in Indonesia, at the same time, the adjacent 1,000 megawatt Cirebon Unit 2, built by the very same parent company, will be coming online at full capacity, meaning that localized impact on people's health, livelihoods, and the environment will become virtually indistinguishable. Meanwhile, coal power project sites where the EDB financing is already implicated are places where the EDB needs to step up to support comprehensive remedy for harm done, meaning enabling swift decommissioning of these projects, financing environmental rehabilitation, and providing restitution to communities through a fully participatory and publicly accountable consultative process. Fifth and finally, supporting a just transition also means taking human rights violations seriously. There is a glaring lack of explicit built-in protocols for responding to retaliation and reprisal risks against community members and civil society organizations that raise concerns about energy transition financing. In this regard, we have noted that ABB's most recent update to the ETM profile online includes a reference to studies proceeding in Vietnam. However, the reality is that environmental lawyers as well as community and health rights advocates are currently working under an intense climate of fear, facing heavy surveillance, threats, intimidation, and in some cases have been threatened to extend prison terms on trumped-up charges. As these are the very people who have been advocating for a shift away from reliance on harmful, resource-intensive energy options in Vietnam, supporting energy transition plans that turn a blind eye to this context are unacceptable, risking reinscribing injustice and rights violations. The reality of reprisals and retaliation against local community, environmental, and rights defenders goes far beyond the ETM and must be addressed not only at the policy level, but also across the institution. ABB must be willing to step up to explicitly articulate a zero-tolerance position against reprisals. For example, proactively issuing statements where their projects, technical assistance, and other investments are implicated, including in Vietnam, but also, for instance, in Mongolia, where the ABB is proposing to support a transmission line associated with a hydropower dam, where local people have faced threats, intimidation, and repression. In closing, we look forward to working with all of you together to have these issues raised today seriously and comprehensively addressed. And with that, I will pass it back to colleagues there at the Songwood Convention Center. Thank you.
Well, in all fairness, how many multilateral development banks in the world will allow us to play that video, right? So, we appreciate the space that we have in the ADB, but obviously there are challenges which remain, and we want to constructively work towards that so voices on the ground can be heard. So that's official proceedings in terms of input from this side of the floor. Now we've got a good chunk of time. We've got about half an hour for Q&A, and if there are any particular questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to raise your hand. There are microphones which will come at you. Unfortunately, VP Said is not here to respond, but I see a few familiar ADB faces in the audience who may volunteer to respond. Heidi. Yeah.
So my name is Heidi Dupree. I'm the head of the NCO and Civil Society Center for ADB. Our door is always open, and we welcome all kinds of opinions and presentations and research and reports. I've been following the ETM process of consultation very closely. NGOC has a technical assistance, and we actually provide support to our colleagues in getting the stakeholders engaging experts and the in-country experts. So we've provided some consultancy to help with the ETM process. I think they have about 10 different consultations already in Indonesia, and Pakistan, I think 2 or 3 already, and there are more to come. Right now, the engagement is mostly with the civil society groups, because once a project is selected, then you have communities identified. But in Pakistan, we're not yet there. We're really at the pre-feasibility study. So Roland, the project officer working on the project, is very much in communication with me. So he's not able to be here, but he will continue to work with his local consultant, Aman, I think, Lisa, you already know Aman and are talking to him. So I think there's more to come in the Pakistan pre-feasibility study for the Vietnam issue. We're also investigating and searching what are the best means to engage with civil society in a complex situation. So I think the team is very aware of that, and they'll be talking to you some more. So I think our ETM consultation team, Nandina, you know, and David, you know, in the Indonesia office, are working very closely and are in contact with Tanya as well. So we'll continue to collaborate with you too on the consultation front. So thank you.
Thank you, Hadi. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts and comments? I see 2 hands there, 3. First with Jiten. Yeah, sorry.
Right, thank you, and I would like to congratulate all the panelists for the presentations. I just want to support some of the concerns raised from the panel, specifically on the inclusion of hydropower project, because I come from the Himalayan region, and we already experienced the impact of large hydropower projects, especially because the Himalayan region is a very fragile region, and we already see the impact. And I think when we look at the hydro, we also need to consider the impact of the hydropower project also on the impact of climate change impact, because we already see a lot of disaster already happening, and construction of hydropower already induces and worsen aggravates the impact of climate change in itself. Because at some point of time, we also need to consider the fact that building hydropower project, mega ones, it also involves construction of series of other infrastructure projects, like transmission line, high voltage transmission line, the road, for example, and it also associates coming up with township, you know, to accommodate the workers and also the construction companies. And I think it all gets so much better on the fragile landscape. And our region is a biological hotspots area, you know, Eastern Himalayan region, Indo-Burma hotspot region. So there are multiple issues in terms of the social impact, the environmental impact, and also the climate change impact. I think these are factors that we also need to consider. And also working very closely with the indigenous group and also supporting indigenous rights. We also experienced the reality that pursuits of large hydropower projects and associated infrastructure can also lead to a lot of conversation around land rights violations. So which means it can also induce this additional aspect of conflict dimension, and which very much with Tanya also raising the issue of the prices, you know, it can also have other implications on the human rights, especially the climate community. So finally, in conclusion, I would request ADB to reconsider the ongoing initiative to support hydropower. And in fact, there are several projects like in Nepal, Lanahu, recently endemic in the northeast part of India, we have the lower Kopani dams are already financed by ADB. And so
I'll have to start with Jiten for this.
Yeah, so finally, my comment is to assist hydropower from just energy transition and to strengthen the support and the accountability mechanism, right, and to recognize the rights of the communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And tomorrow we have a safeguards discussion, and hopefully we can bring this up again. So, and I know Jiten, but Jiten, do kindly introduce yourself. Jiten, you're one from.
I work with the group on the Center for Research and Advocacy, based in Pakistan.
Thank you. So,
okay, I'm from the side of the MSawati. The ETM Indonesia just the 2.1. It's very good for us. We are surprised why they just the 2.1. We are against the Cirebon 1 before this contract is in 2007, also against Cirebon 2. And they choose that project, Tanya already mentioned. With the second one, they want to retire the first one, but the second one will be operated this month. So it's like, so why you retire the one that you will operate the bigger second one? And also from process is like very secret. We know when within the meeting. Before we know there is some power plant will be retired, but not Cirebon 1. It's also not involved with the community, also with the worker. If they want to search protest against Cirebon 1, the protest against Cirebon 2, they will find a lot of names, but they are never invited to talk. Also the workers, we are close to the worker. We ask the worker, are they invited to talking about the transition? They said they didn't invite it. Maybe the last one, maybe, but yeah, until February, until March, they are not invited. Also, the problem, the transition is not only for the worker, but the impacted community that affected by the coal power plant. There is now thousands of fishermen, thousands of the salt makers, not yet transitioned from their work before the power plant. They are now didn't have any work. So for us, it's like the justice only for the workers of the coal power plant or for the company, not to all of people that are affected by the power plant itself. So for us, it's not. There is no transition. Also, we heard the transition is not for other renewable, but they will repurpose the power plant, like ammonia or hydrogen. So it's from fossil to another type of fossil fuel.
Thank you, Song. I know you came all the way to Songdo to share that input, and as Heidi mentioned in the beginning, there are consultations ongoing in Indonesia, and I would bring this to attention to the ADB and the NGO Center to make sure the voices which are not being heard in the Indonesian context are going to be heard in the future. I think the back.
Hi, I'm Morgan Davis. I'm from IFR. Thank you guys very much for the wonderful insights. Thank you for the comments also coming in. I wanted to ask a question to ladies specifically to follow up on what you were saying about financing some of this transition. Do you have any thoughts on products like sustainability-linked bonds and loans that could change the payments that need to be made based on KPIs being met when it comes to some of these transitions or goals? Or do you have any other thoughts you could share about some of the ideal financing that we could see in this area?
Specifically for renewable energy or the energy transition, we're a little bit more flexible in terms of what we think might be appropriate financial instruments. Definitely, we don't accept lending or loan and similar instruments for adaptation or for loss and damage financing. For instance, doesn't make sense. There's no way that governments and communities can raise the funds to pay back loans, and why are we asking communities and developing countries to cover the cost of adaptation and loss and damage themselves? Because the idea is that there were others more responsible for this crisis, so the impacts, they have to be providing finance to cover these impacts. For renewable energy and the just transition, and that's also broadly covered in terms of that principle, that the financing for this for developing countries should be covered through the climate finance obligations of the North. That's very clear in the Climate Convention. However, since we do understand that in this climate in this situation where finance has to be raised for many, many very urgent things, some argument can be made that highly concessional lending can be used for renewable energy projects because there is some cost recovery, It's especially since it's not just poor communities that will be availing of renewable energy. There will be corporations, industries, and there will be cost recovery from the new energy systems. I think we would need to look, therefore, at the specifics of these instruments like green bonds and so on, whether they will be actually designed, how they will be designed in an appropriate way for the renewable energy transition, and then what kind of renewable energy. Will this be what they call utility scale systems, or will this be the decentralized community-based or residential household systems, where we don't think that those who will be building these energy systems and these distributed community-based systems will find it helpful if the instruments were in the form of bonds, right? Or even the scale of financing will be totally different. So we will have to reserve our opinion depending on how these bonds are designed, issued, who's going to be responsible, what are the terms, and so on and so forth. But at this point in time, our priority is really making sure that the financing to be delivered at scale is going to be useful for governments and communities in order to build the systems that are actually needed, especially needed to address energy poverty. And so financing should not be costly. Financing should not just simply result in bigger debts to be worried about on top of the transition. And then who will be using these financial instruments is also a big question.
Thank you, Lily. Just a quick thought on that. I think the policy coverage on just transition from multilateral financing or bilateral financing filtering through financial intermediaries or SPVs or commercial banks, what we are noticing is that the policy coverage at the tertiary or at the superior level of the channeling of the fund is there, but the lower you go down to the equity financing and the sub-projects, the policy coverage just starts to dissipate. And poor rated borrowers do not have environmental social management systems. They're generally outsourced, which have really poor track records. So there's a lot of financial due diligence of systems which need to be really done. And maybe that's a different conversation for a different day, and I'm taking up too much time. There was another hand in the middle. Yes, the gentleman in the middle.
Just coming from the ESP transition economies meeting that Morgan moderated, and I was thinking how different the science, policy, and industry discourses are on the same agreements that we make in the world. And I also now believe that the people's disclosing is far different from what we're talking about. There are presumptions that we make. I was also the chief negotiator for Sri Lanka 2016 and 17, the sustainable development process, goals process. Now, number one is that we make presumptions that when there is a global agenda, not just the countries, but the multilateral international agencies are in line, in sync, in convergence with them. Second part is that if there's a transformation agenda, and I have discussed this directly with the DACCHA, the OECD, with Indonesia, and I noted out in the plenary that we have a transformative agenda, and we keep the financing architecture and the trade architecture separate from the transformation agenda. So you keep the Paris Agreement, you keep the NDCs away from the private sector, and then you try to create mechanism financial instruments which keep on tracking poor countries into the system. And that is when the Adani Group representative, I'm sorry I raised my hand, I couldn't get a chance, but you cannot argue for intergenerational equity to justify business as usual in a current world. My question now is that the civil society, now ESG is moving forward without clarity. You are going to give it twist like you did to CSR, right? But there's going to be a lot of siphoning of money through the market forces, the development banks, and the commercial banks itself. How is civil society going to engage in the public-private people partnership process to make sense into the transition. I'm not a great fan of transition. I believe it's a transformation. You don't come 7.5 years later into the transformation agenda and talk transition again. That is leveraging back to them. So I'm just wondering how the civil society scale this, because I didn't get from the private sector or the green climate funds architecture in that. I don't see any new trends emerging.
Thank you.
I would
For
much
a
appreciate it from the civil society.
very, very passionate intervention. I'll let the panelists respond, and I'll keep my thoughts for the very last. Any other comments or thoughts before we go to the last round of reflections? I think we still have a bit of time. Bruce?
You want to go first? Oh, no, okay.
Could we get a microphone up front? Lady, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Noel O'Brien. I'm Director of Climate Change with the ADB, and so I'll really just come back to one of the questions that you had, or the comments, which was in relation to the just transition aspects with regard to ETM itself. So maybe just to clarify that on the actual, if we look at a specific plant, and the Indonesia deal was mentioned, so in that context, the actual just transition process for the workforce is captured under the traditional safeguard process, and it will be part of any agreement that is eventually signed. There is also that question of the wider workforce, so particularly in relation to indirect and other induced impacts, so it may be service providers for transport, etc., and how that is covered. So on the movement that is happening with this is that ADB, together with the governments and the actual holder of the deal, would be part of a conversation that and discussions and negotiations that tries to bring about a resolution for that, and obviously there will be costs associated with that at the particular asset level. In parallel to the ETM process, ADB is expanding its efforts on just transition, and that is looking at just transition not just at the asset level, but at a national framework and a country level. So that is an area that we've been building up some technical assistance resources, and within the context of Indonesia, we are working at that level. So to put in place a national framework, because obviously for an individual plant, it can be dealt with at one level, but if there are multiple plants to which are transitioning, it impacts the coal extraction industry, etc. And so that is work that is ongoing, and I think with Heidi and the team, that is an area that we are happy to have further discussions with you on. Okay, thank you.
Great.
And Bruce.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much to the NGO Forum for organising this session, and for everyone joining today. Really useful and interesting interventions from everyone. I wanted to pick up just very briefly on the issue of consultations, because that's been raised a couple of times. Firstly, as you've heard, there's a pilot program that's being developed, and there's a number of circles of stakeholder engagement or consultation processes that are being developed. The initial ones have been quite strategic, looking at the overall approach, both with the potential partners that we could collaborate on to actually rapidly accelerate the closure of coal-fired power stations, but also at a strategic policy level with government and more strategically with civil society organisations. But this process does need to involve the local communities, clearly, and there is a commitment in the process for that to be undertaken. Now, something that you can also help us on is the appropriate time and place and how to organise those effectively. But I think the commitment from the ADB, and you've heard that also from Vice President Saeed, is that very much is part of the process. So we're committed to seeing that through. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing was the issue was a safe space for civil society and for local communities, and the very concerning issue of retaliation. Now, this is something that is very important to us and that we're concerned about. In fact, our existing safeguard policy already has requirements for meaningful consultation, which should include, no coercion, no intimidation, reprisals, if it's physical or threats of reprisals, is that, and it's beyond that. Now, so that's not something we would ever want to see, and when allegations are made, we do look at them closely. Now, moving forward, and we'll be talking about this tomorrow, new safeguard policy, we're looking to be further and more explicit in terms of no tolerance to retaliation. We're also looking to develop a specific standard on stakeholder engagement that can take this further. But I think we'll have a chance tomorrow. We have another panel, so please come and join us then and we can talk more about it. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Looking forward to the conversation tomorrow. It says 10 more minutes on my clock. Maybe quick interventions from our panels. Maybe we can take it.
Yeah, just on this issue about transition and transformation. For us, clearly, for civil society and many movements, there's no dichotomy between the two. We do realize there is a transitional process, the transition process that needs to be governed, regulated, guided by principles, and at the same time, quick enough at the pace that is required by our effort to save ourselves and the planet from climate catastrophe. But transformation is a bigger process. So the transition should serve that bigger transformation process. So for instance, our focus today has been just talking about the energy transition. I cannot conceive that the energy transition can be complete and whole unless there's an economic transition. I think the opening remarks made by the Vice President also acknowledges that. But what kind of economic transformation and where we end up, maybe a huge area where we will probably have debates with the ADB, given, for instance, some of our, deeply, how we have been deeply disturbed by some of the major assumptions in the development paradigm, the economic growth models, the engines for what should be driving this growth and development that the ADB has clearly laid out in its strategic policies. We have, for certain, deep debates. We'll have deep debates about that. But indeed, we can't talk about just energy transition. The fact that we're trying to change the whole energy into renewable energy process will talk about a lot of infrastructural changes in economic and trade relations, for instance, just picking up on one of the key principles here. This is about critical minerals. If we're going to transform into 100% renewable energy, there will be such a huge spike in the demand for critical minerals that is needed for renewable energy. 80% of critical minerals is from the south. It's from developing countries, and not even from many developing countries, from just a few. And if we're not going to question the currently highly inequitable trade and investment relations between the north and the South will continue to be the source of critical minerals for use in the North, even in a 100% renewable energy system, and we will still end up with a problem of energy poverty if we can't even use our own resources for our own renewable energy needs. So there's going to be not just very focused on energy sector changes. This will require many changes in the economy, and unless we do that, it's not going. The transition, as was acknowledged, is not going to be real and not going to be certainly enough to address, the climate and the development crisis.
Thank you.
So one of the things that our community members, especially from the way speakers are saying on transition, is that yes, we recognize that transition should be fast, but we need time. The discrimination, the historical differences are just so vast that they cannot transition from one job to another. I have a master's degree, I don't even know how to drive a car. So when we promise jobs to waste speakers, for example, and then put in the document they will be trained as drivers, truck drivers, etc., in the waste to energy plants, and promise 10 jobs, and then displace 450. That's not a just transition. So what do we plan for the rest of those who have been displaced by the system for many years, and then they are just economically being productive from the waste, from the discards that we have been producing. And I'm glad that you linked this to the economic changes that we have. In my presentation, I was just talking about the disposal system, but in Zero Waste movement, we're linking this on how we produce our goods and how we plan out from the extraction of resources, from the manufacturing, from the distribution, up to the disposal, and how we, as responsible consumers, but the responsibility is greater for the corporations, is to make those materials as longer as possible useful for human consumption. And when we burn this, we see waste as an energy feedstock, burn them, and then they're gone from the earth for recyclability, for reusability. So there's have to be an economic, a difference of approach, a difference of thinking, and it's not just in the energy sector, it's the waste sector, it's the economic production. On the other side of the ADB, there's the integration of value chains, and that just upscales production. And that requires intensive energy needs, intensive extraction. And that's where just transition and who else are affected by this climate change, by the need for a swift transition, who we need to respond to. We have to make it in the plans.
I think it works. There. Thank you. Unfortunately, VP Said is not here because I wanted to address his concern about the use of the term bailout. I think I need to clarify that part of the concern in the Philippines, why we're afraid that we might have a bailout, is that policies and, as I said, policies and technological developments are happening in our country. So we already have a coal moratorium. That means ADB cannot fund a new coal project even if it wanted to. It was effective as of, I know it's not, but even if it wanted to, it can. We already have the GAP and we have a Renewable Energy Act. That's not to say that there's no battle there. There is. There are continuous policy engagement and policy discussions about are they developing fossil gas or what else do we need to do as far as policies and mechanisms. But the point is that there's increasing transition and policy risks in the Philippines. So what ADB might benefit from doing better is incorporating and considering these policy developments and these technological developments in planning out its investments in the Philippines. Because while these transitions, these risks are growing for fossil fuel project owners and proponents and financiers in the country, we also have developments as far as renewable energy, and we believe that the best defense here is offense. That growing the renewable energy portfolio and the power mix contribution and all of these investments, aggressively pursuing renewable energy, especially in light of how much more fossil fuels is costing the Philippines as far as electricity, I think it might be a better push for just transition in the country. Aggressively pursuing renewable energy, especially the kind that would address access and, of course, reliability. That's all. Thank you.
As Asian is in your name, so Asian Development Bank, including other 33 countries, Pakistan was one of the founding members of Asian Development Bank. So, we really have a sense that we feel that you are among us and you are with us. So, we have high hopes in you, and we expect that you empathize that how the Asian communities are really suffering from these all climate change challenges. So do support us, and transition cannot be just without the real robust engagement of the communities at every stage and very inception stage of the transition mechanism. So engaging communities at the later stage, no. Engage the communities at each stage every stage and at the very inception stage. That is the just energy transition mechanism is. And please do not support us in coming out of phasing out the coal, but do not let us drown into the gas and other fossil fuels. I mean, coming out of one and drowned in another, that is not the just. Just transition means out of every and each kind of fossil fuel and be with renewables. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiza. Very, very powerful comments from everyone. This is where I say thank you to a whole bunch of people. Firstly, the technical support folk at the back who made this session possible. I really thank the engagement from the crowd, both from civil society as well as ABB, for being honest and forthright and working through the challenges. Special applause, let's refrain for the panelists, I'll leave that at the end. One just final thought is how quickly we forgot how bad it was in the pandemic. We made a packet of noodles last for like 3 days, man. So it doesn't mean that as a humanity we cannot stretch resources, as Mayan said. And you know, we're also, when I'm going around the different panel discussions across the halls, nobody's talking about the elephant in the room. You've got a Ukrainian war which is not ending, which has massively impacted energy pricing in the world. Lower and middle income countries have reserves which are depleting faster than they can think of. So at this stage, when a multilateral development bank of over 50 years is putting money out of the door, it has to be responsible. It has to be responsible, and we have to make it last. And if we are renewable energy invested, that makes us energy secure and less energy dependent on the world market. So in that spirit, I hope we can continue all the effective work that you do, both inside the institution and outside it. And I thank you all for attending this panel. I hope you have a great meeting ahead. Thank you.